From the outside, Emily Ross's life looked flawless. A shining house on Maple Avenue, a silver Lexus in the driveway, a husband with perfect teeth and a charming smile. To anyone watching, she was the picture of success, beautiful, confident, untouchable. But behind that perfect image was a story she never wanted anyone to hear. Her mother, Linda Ross. Linda wasn't rich, she wasn't fancy, she was a nurse. A tired woman who worked endless night shifts at a small-town hospital. Her back always hurt, her feet always ached, but she never stopped smiling. Linda had only one dream, to give her daughter the life she never had. She used to whisper at night, "You'll go farther than me, sweetheart. You'll have choices." And little Emily would hug her back and promise, "I'll make you proud, Mom." For years, that promise kept Linda going. But things changed. When Emily left for college, she entered a different world. A world of money. A world of expensive cars, designer handbags, and perfect smiles. Her classmates came from families with power and connections. Their parents were doctors, lawyers, business owners. And then there was Emily. The girl with secondhand clothes and a mother who smelled of disinfectant and coffee. At first, Emily tried to fit in. She worked at the library, studied hard, and called her mom every Sunday. But as time went on, the calls became shorter, the texts fewer, until one day they stopped completely. She didn't mean to forget her mother, not at first. But the more she tried to fit into her new world, the more she felt ashamed of where she came from. Then, one spring afternoon, Linda came to visit. She wore her best floral dress, the one she saved for church, and brought a box of homemade cookies. Emily's friends laughed behind her back. "Your mom's so sweet, like old-fashioned sweet." And everyone giggled. Emily left too, pretending it didn't hurt, but that night she threw the cookies away. That was the day she started to hide her past. Years passed. Emily graduated. She reinvented herself. She spoke differently, dressed differently. She even changed the way she laughed. And then she met Daniel. Daniel was everything she thought she wanted. Confident, wealthy, charming. He took her to restaurants with white tablecloths and called her my classy girl. When he proposed, she said yes before he even finished the question. But Linda never got the call. She found out about the wedding from Facebook. Her daughter in a white dress, standing by the ocean, smiling like a stranger. The post read, "Forever starts now." Linda sat at her small kitchen table, staring at the screen. Tears fell into her hands, but she smiled anyway. That night, she wrote a letter. "My dearest Emily, I saw your wedding pictures. You look so beautiful, sweetheart. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. I hope your husband makes you as happy as you've always made me. Love, Mom." She mailed it the morning after. Weeks passed. No reply. Still, she believed her daughter would come around. But she never did. The new house, the new life, the new husband, they left no room for the woman who had given up everything for her. One spring day, Linda made a decision. She had been saving up for months just to buy something small, a bouquet of pink tulips, Emily's favorite. She took the bus to Maple Avenue and stood in front of the big white house. Her hands trembled as she rang the bell. Daniel opened the door. He looked at her the way someone might look at a delivery driver, polite but cold. "Can I help you?" he asked softly. "I'm Emily's mother. I just wanted to surprise her." He hesitated for a second, then stepped back. "Emily's busy. Maybe another time." From inside, Emily's voice called out, "Who is it?" "Just a delivery person," Daniel answered and closed the door. The click of that door echoed in Linda's heart. She stood there, frozen. Then she placed the flowers on the doorstep and walked away. From the upstairs window, Emily watched. Her hands shook. Her throat burned. For a second, she almost ran after her mother. But she didn't. She told herself it was for the best. Daniel wouldn't understand. The neighbors might talk. So she stayed inside. And Linda disappeared down the street, her shadow growing smaller with every step. That night, neither of them slept. Linda sat alone in her tiny apartment, staring at her phone, waiting for a message that never came. And in the perfect white house, Emily stared at her reflection. Flawless, polished, but empty. For the first time in years, she didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. Somewhere deep inside, she felt it. A strange, heavy chill. As if something had just shifted. As if life had just taken note of her choices. Because karma doesn't need to rush. It always arrives. Exactly when it should. Time moved on. Months turned into years. And the distance between Emily and her mother grew wider, colder, quieter. Linda kept hoping her daughter would call. Every birthday, every Christmas, every Mother's Day. She waited. She checked her phone 100 times a day. But it never rang. Still, she didn't give up. She sent cards. Little notes with hearts and handwritten words. Shaky but full of love. Sometimes she sent gifts, too. A scarf, a book, or a jar of homemade jam. Small reminders that she was still there, still thinking of her little girl. But those gifts never got a reply. Some came back unopened. Others she never heard about at all. Emily, on the other hand, barely noticed them. She was too busy living her new life, the one she thought she deserved. Daniel's business was growing. They started going at dinner parties, charity events, vacations in Italy and France. Every moment was perfectly documented for her followers. "Feeling blessed," her captions always said. And yet late at night, when the house went quiet, Emily sometimes found herself scrolling through old photos, ones she never posted. Pictures of her and her mom smiling in front of their tiny apartment. Linda holding a birthday cake, Emily blowing out the candles. For a second, her heart softened. But then she'd hear Daniel's voice from the other room. "Babe, what are you doing?" "Nothing," she'd say, quickly locking her phone. Daniel didn't like to talk about her past. He said it didn't fit with their new life. He wanted perfection, no messy stories, no poor relatives showing up uninvited. And Emily listened. She always did. One evening, it happened, the moment that changed everything. It was raining hard outside. The wind howled against the windows. Emily was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, when the doorbell rang. Daniel frowned. Who the hell visits at this hour? Emily opened the door and froze. There, standing in the rain, was her mother. Soaked, shivering, holding a plastic container covered in foil. "Emily," Linda said softly. Her voice was weak but warm. "I heard you were sick last week. I made your favorite soup, chicken and rice." For a moment, Emily couldn't speak. Memories flooded her mind. The smell of that soup on cold nights, her mother humming in the kitchen. But before she could answer, Daniel stepped forward. He looked at Linda like she was a stranger. "You can't just show up here. This isn't appropriate." Linda blinked, confused. "I just wanted to help. I'm sorry if—" Daniel cut her off. "We have everything we need. You don't need to bring us anything." Emily's heart pounded. She wanted to defend her mother. She wanted to say something, anything. But shame kept her silent. "Mom," she said quietly, "you should have called first." Linda nodded, trying to smile. "I didn't want to bother you." She looked down at the container. "I'll just leave this then." Daniel took the soup and placed it on the ground right there on the porch in the pouring rain. "Good night," he said coldly and shut the door. Silence. Emily stood frozen, staring at the closed door. She could hear the rain pounding against it, could almost feel her mother's presence fading on the other side. Her throat tightened. "That was harsh," she whispered. Daniel shrugged. "She needs to learn boundaries, Emily. You're not a kid anymore." "But she's my mother." "Your mother," he said, his voice low, "is the reason you always doubt yourself. You've moved on. You don't need her dragging you back into that sad little world that she lives in." Emily said nothing. She just nodded. But deep down, something inside her cracked. Outside, Linda stood in the rain for a long time. She stared at the closed door, the same door she once dreamed her daughter would open to welcome her in. Her fingers were numb, her heart heavier than ever. She whispered, "I love you, Emily," to no one in particular. Then she turned and walked away, leaving the soup behind. By the time Daniel opened the door an hour later to throw it out, the container was half filled with rainwater. Inside, Emily sat on the couch, silent, staring into space. The sound of the rain filled the room like a song she couldn't turn off. That night, she dreamed of her mother. Linda was younger in the dream, smiling, holding her little girl in her arms. Emily woke up crying, but she didn't tell Daniel. She couldn't. Instead, she buried herself in work, in appearances, in everything that made her look strong and successful. But no matter how hard she tried, that night stayed with her. The image of her mother in the rain wouldn't go away. She didn't know it yet, but life had started taking notes. And karma had already begun her quiet journey back.
At first, nothing seemed wrong. Life went on, just like always. Emily kept posting pictures, smiling at parties, and pretending everything was perfect. But little by little, things began to change. It started with Daniel. He had always been charming, confident, smooth, the kind of man who could sell anything to anyone. But lately, he had become distant, more secretive, more cold. He spent longer hours at work. He stopped asking how Emily's day was, stopped saying goodnight. And when she'd try to talk, he'd sigh and check his phone. One evening, while setting the dinner table, Emily noticed something strange. A faint scent of perfume, not hers, on Daniel's jacket. She froze. Her stomach twisted. But when she asked, he laughed it off. "You're imagining things," he said. "You've been stressed lately. Don't start acting paranoid." She tried to believe him. She really did. But the voice in her head wouldn't stop whispering. Something isn't right. Days turned into weeks. The distance grew, and the silence between them became unbearable. Then came the money problems. One afternoon, Emily got a call from the bank. A polite woman told her that their joint account was nearly empty. Emily blinked, confused. "That's not possible," she said. "There should be plenty left." But there wasn't. The savings they'd built, the comfort she thought she had, was gone. When she confronted Daniel that night, he didn't even look surprised. "I told you, babe, I had to make a few business investments. It's temporary." "Investments?" she asked. "With all our money?" He shrugged. "You wouldn't understand. It's complicated." Her voice trembled. "Daniel, we could lose the house." He leaned back, smirking. "Relax. You act like your mom, always panicking." The words hit her like a slap. Her mom. That night, as Daniel snored beside her, Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought about Linda, about the rain, about the soup left on the porch. For the first time, she wished she had called her back, just to hear her voice, just to feel safe. The next morning, she decided to visit her. She didn't tell Daniel. She just got in the car and drove to her mother's old apartment. But when she got there, the door was locked. A new name was on the mailbox. She asked the landlord, "Do you know where Linda Ross moved?" The man looked at her for a moment, then sighed. "She left months ago. Moved to a smaller place across town, I think. She wasn't doing well." Emily felt a lump in her throat. "Not doing well? What do you mean?" She looked tired, sick, maybe, but she never complained, always smiling. Kind lady. Emily thanked him and left, but the words stayed with her. Sick, tired, always smiling. She realized she didn't even know her mother's new address or her phone number. Somehow, in her perfect, polished life, she had erased the only person who ever truly loved her. Driving back home, the sky darkened. Thunder rolled across the horizon and raindrops splashed against the windshield. It felt familiar, like the night she turned her mother away. When she got home, Daniel was waiting. He looked furious. "Where were you?" "I went to see my mom," she said quietly. "Your mom? You're unbelievable. You think now's the time for family drama? We're drowning in bills and you're out visiting some old woman." "Don't talk about her like that," Emily snapped. He stepped closer, his tone sharp. "You wouldn't even have this life if it weren't for me. Don't forget that." She stared at him, realizing for the first time how much she had lost herself. That night, they didn't speak. The house felt colder than ever. Days passed, then weeks, and one morning, Daniel simply didn't come home. No call, no message, nothing. Emily tried to reach him, but his phone was off. By the next day, she found out the truth. Daniel's office was empty. His business partner told her with a pitying look that Daniel had withdrawn everything, every last cent, and vanished. The car, the accounts, the savings. Gone. Emily sat in her spotless kitchen, surrounded by silence. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound left in her perfect world. For the first time, she realized what it felt like
to have nothing. That night, she cried until her voice broke, and in the darkness, she whispered her mother's name. "Mom, I'm sorry." But Linda didn't hear her. And somewhere far away, in a small, lonely apartment, Linda Ross coughed into her hand, unaware that the daughter who once shut her out was now falling apart. Karma had arrived, quietly, exactly on time.
Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. But Daniel never came back. At first, Emily refused to believe it. She told herself it was a mistake, that he'd call, explain everything, and they'd laugh about it later. But the truth couldn't be ignored forever. The bills piled up, the mortgage went unpaid, and the life she had built, the perfect shining image, began to crumble. The Lexus was repossessed, the jewelry was sold, even the furniture started disappearing, one piece at a time. Soon, the big white house on Maple Avenue didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a museum of broken dreams. Emily avoided the neighbors. She stopped posting on social media. The once perfect woman vanished from the digital world, leaving behind only silence. And in that silence, guilt began to grow. Every time she passed the porch, she saw it in her mind, her mother standing there in the rain holding that container of soup. Every time she looked in the mirror, she saw Linda's tired eyes staring back at her. She tried to call her mother, but the number was no longer in service. She searched online. Nothing. She even drove to her old neighborhood, hoping someone knew where Linda had gone. But all she found were strangers and empty looks. For the first time in years, Emily felt small, lost, alone. One night, as she sat in the dimly lit kitchen, she noticed something strange, an envelope on the counter. It had been there for days, unopened, mixed with the unpaid bills. Her name was written on it in shaky handwriting. She froze. It was her mother's handwriting. Her heart pounded as she tore it open. "My dear Emily, I hope you're well. I wanted to let you know I've moved to a smaller apartment near the hospital. The doctor says I need more rest now, but I'm still working when I can. Don't worry about me, sweetheart. Just promise you'll take care of yourself. Love, always. Mom." The date on the letter was 6 months ago. Her hands trembled. Her mother had been sick, and she hadn't even known. She wanted to scream, to try, to go back in time, but all she could do was sit there, surrounded by the ghosts of her choices. That night, she made a decision. She packed a small bag and left the house that no longer felt like hers. The next morning, she took the bus, the same one her mother had taken years ago, across town. The ride was quiet. Gray clouds hung low in the sky. Everything looked dull and washed out. When she finally arrived, she found the old brick apartment building her mother had mentioned. Her hands shook as she knocked on the door marked 3B. No answer. She knocked again. Still nothing. An elderly neighbor opened the door across the hall. "Are you looking for Linda Ross?" she asked softly. Emily nodded, her throat dry. "Yes, is she here?" The woman's face fell. "Oh, dear, you didn't hear?" Emily's heart stopped. "Hear? What?" The woman sighed. "Your mother, she passed away last month. Heart complications, I think. She was in the hospital for a few days. The nurses said she talked about her daughter all the time." Emily's knees gave out. She collapsed against the wall, gasping for air. Her mind spun, her heart screaming words she couldn't form. Too late. The neighbor gently helped her sit down. She was a lovely woman, she said, always smiling. She told everyone how proud she was of you. Tears streamed down Emily's face. She couldn't stop them. Her hands covered her mouth as sobs shook her body. Her mother loved her until the end, even after everything, even after being ignored, even after being turned away. The neighbor handed her a small box. She asked me to keep this for you, the woman whispered. Emily opened it slowly. Inside was a folded letter and a photo. One from years ago. Her and her mom at the park, laughing, faces full of life. The letter was short. Emily, if you're reading this, I hope you found peace. No matter what happened, I want you to know that I've forgiven you long ago. You'll always be my little girl. Love always. Mom. Emily pressed the letter to her chest and wept. She wept for the years she had wasted, for the love she had thrown away, for every unanswered call and unopened card. The sky outside darkened, thunder rumbled again, just like that night in the rain. And for the first time in her adult life, Emily prayed. Not for wealth, not for comfort, just for forgiveness. She stayed at her mother's empty apartment until sunrise. Sitting on the floor, holding the photo, she whispered, "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." Outside, the first light of morning spilled through the clouds. The city began to wake. Somewhere, in the quiet hum of dawn, Emily felt it. A warmth, faint but real, as if her mother was still there, one last time, telling her it was okay. And though her life was now in ruins, Emily knew one thing for certain. Karma had done her job. Not to destroy her, but to teach her.
The next morning, Emily walked through the city like a ghost. The world looked different now, colder, quieter. Every building, every sound felt like a reminder of everything she had lost. She carried her mother's letter in her bag, folded carefully, close to her heart. Every few minutes, she touched it, as if to make sure it was still there. She had nowhere to go, no husband, no money, no home. For years, she had been so proud of the life she built. Now she realized it had all been an illusion. The house, the parties, the perfect photos, none of it mattered anymore. The only thing that mattered was gone. That evening, she went back to the small apartment one last time. The landlord allowed her to stay for the night. Linda's belongings were still there. Neatly folded clothes, some books, a small framed photo of Emily as a little girl. Emily sat on the edge of the bed staring at the walls. They were bare, but somehow they felt full of memories, full of love. She whispered, "How did you live like this and still smile, Mom?" Her voice broke. She opened one of the drawers and found a small journal. Her mother's handwriting filled the pages. Nursing notes, shopping lists, and in between, pieces of her heart. Emily didn't answer my call today. Maybe she's busy. I don't want to bother her. I'm proud of her. I hope she knows that. Sometimes I wish I could tell her how lonely it gets here, but I don't want her to worry. The words blurred as Emily's eyes filled with tears. Each sentence was a knife, a reminder of how blind she had been. She turned another page. I saw Emily's new house online today. It's beautiful. She made it, just like I always hoped. Emily pressed her forehead against the book and cried. There were no words left, only regret. Hours passed. The room grew dark. The city lights flickered through the window, painting soft patterns across the floor.
Then something shifted. A strange calm settled over her. For the first time in years, she wasn't pretending. She wasn't performing. She was just herself. Broken, but real. She took a deep breath and whispered, "I can't change the past, Mom, but I can change what comes next." The next morning, Emily woke up early. She cleaned the apartment, packed her mother's things with care, and spoke to the landlord. She decided to pay off what she could, selling what little jewelry she had left. It wasn't much, but it felt right. Before she left, she placed the photo of her and her mother on the windowsill. Sunlight fell across their smiling faces. For the first time, Emily smiled back. That day, she walked to the hospital where her mother had worked, the same hospital where Linda had spent most of her life caring for others. The nurses remembered her. "Linda Ross?" they said, smiling softly. "She was one of the kindest souls we ever had here, always helping, even when she was tired." Emily nodded, trying not to cry. "She was my mom." The nurse's smile faded into sympathy. "She talked about you a lot, said you were her reason for everything." Emily swallowed hard. She wanted to tell them the truth, that she hadn't been there when it mattered, that she didn't deserve such love. But instead, she said quietly, "Thank you." Before she left, she made a decision. She applied for a volunteer position at the hospital. They needed help delivering meals to patients and cleaning rooms. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt like a way to begin again. Her first day was difficult. She wasn't used to the long hours, the smells, the exhaustion. But every time she wanted to quit, she thought of her mother. Of those long nights Linda had spent doing the same thing, quietly, humbly, without complaint. And something inside Emily began to change. She started to see people differently, not by what they wore or how much they earned, but by how kind they were, by how they treated others when no one was watching. One evening, as she was leaving the hospital, she saw an elderly woman struggling to carry her bag. She rushed over to help. The woman smiled and said, "You remind me of my daughter." Emily blinked back tears. "Thank you," she whispered. On her way home, she looked up at the sky. The sunset burned gold and orange across the clouds. For the first time in a long while, she felt peace. She whispered, "Are you watching me, Mom?" A gentle breeze brushed her face, warm, comforting, and she smiled. Because deep down, she knew the answer. Karma had done its work. It had broken her, but also rebuilt her. And though the pain would never fully disappear, it had turned into something else, something pure, gratitude.
Months passed. The seasons changed. And slowly, Emily began to rebuild her life. It wasn't easy. Every day felt like a test. But for the first time, she didn't run from her pain. She faced it. She continued volunteering at the hospital. At first, people didn't recognize her. She was no longer the glamorous woman from Maple Avenue. Her clothes were simple, her hair tied back, no makeup, no jewelry. But her eyes, they were softer now. And in that softness, people saw something genuine. The nurses liked her. The patients adored her. Even the children in the pediatric ward called her Miss Emily with the warm smile. She didn't do it for praise. She did it for her mother. Every kind word she spoke, every hand she held, felt like a small way to say thank you. One afternoon, while sorting supplies, a young nurse approached her. "Hey, Emily," she said, smiling. "Did you know your mom's name is still on the staff board? She must have been loved here." Emily followed her to the hallway. There it was, a faded nameplate. Linda Ross, nurse, 28 years of service. Emily ran her fingers over the letters. The metal was cool to the touch, but her heart felt warm. She whispered, "You're still here, Mom." From that day on, she made it her mission to keep her mother's memory alive. She started a small fund, the Linda Ross Foundation, to help nursing students who couldn't afford their education. It wasn't much at first, just a few donations and a simple website. But word spread. People remembered Linda. They remembered her kindness, her dedication, her smile. Soon, others began to contribute. Former patients, co-workers, even strangers who were moved by the story. Within a year, the foundation had grown enough to support several students. Every scholarship letter began the same way. This opportunity is given in memory of Nurse Linda Ross, whose love and sacrifice continue to inspire. Every time Emily signed those words, she felt her mother close. But even with her new purpose, she still carried regret. There were nights when she woke up crying, whispering apologies to the empty air. And every time she passed a bakery or smelled chicken soup, she remembered. Her mother in the rain, the flowers on the doorstep, the silence that followed. One evening, after a long shift, Emily walked to the park where she used to go as a child. It was quiet, the sky painted with soft pinks and golds. She sat on a bench and pulled out her mother's old journal. For the first time, she wasn't afraid to read the last page. If Emily ever reads this, I hope she knows that I never stopped loving her. People make mistakes. That's how we grow. I just want her to live with kindness, the kind that doesn't need an audience. Emily closed the book, pressing it to her chest. Tears slid down her face, but this time they didn't feel like punishment. They felt like healing. She looked around the park. The same swings, the same trees, the same breeze. For a moment, she could almost hear her mother's laugh. A little girl nearby ran into her mother's arms, giggling. Emily smiled. She felt something lift inside her, a quiet forgiveness, both given and received. That night, she went home and began to write. Not for an audience, not for followers, just for herself. She wrote her story. The truth. All of it. The pride, the shame, the loss, the lesson. When she finished, she titled it, "The Daughter Who Forgot and Remembered Too Late." She didn't expect anyone to read it. But when she posted it online a week later, something unexpected happened. People connected to it. Thousands of comments poured in, messages from strangers saying, "I called my mom today," or "Thank you for reminding me what matters." Emily cried as she read them. Her mother's love was still reaching people even through her. The story went viral, but this time Emily didn't feel proud in the old way. It wasn't about attention or perfection. It was about truth. She visited her mother's grave the next morning. The headstone was simple, surrounded by wildflowers. She knelt down, placed fresh tulips, pink, of course, and smiled softly. "Mom," she whispered, "you finally know my name. You know what kind of person you are, and I'll make sure they never forget." A single tear rolled down her cheek, but it wasn't from sadness, it was gratitude. The wind rustled through the trees, gentle and warm. It felt like a hug. Emily closed her eyes. A year passed, and though Emily's life was simple now, smaller, quieter, it finally felt right. She still worked at the hospital, still ran her mother's foundation,
still lived in the tiny apartment near downtown. But this time she wasn't chasing anything. Not status, not perfection, not approval. She had found peace in purpose. Every morning, she walked past the same corner cafe on her way to work. The barista knew her name. The nurses greeted her with smiles. The world no longer felt cold. One day, as she was leaving the hospital, a young woman stopped her. She looked nervous, holding a piece of paper. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Are you Emily Ross?" "Yes, I am." The girl's eyes brightened. "I just wanted to thank you. I'm one of the nursing students your foundation helped this year. I couldn't afford school after my mom got sick. Your scholarship saved me." Emily blinked, her throat tightening. "I'm so happy to hear that," she said gently. The girl nodded. "I hope someday I can help people like your mom did. She sounds like she was incredible." Emily smiled again, tears shining in her eyes. She was. They talked for a few minutes about classes, about life, about kindness. Before the girl left, she said something that made Emily freeze. "You know, when I read your story online, the one about your mom, I called my net same night. We hadn't spoken in years, so thank you, really." Emily stood there, speechless, watching the girl walk away. It felt like the universe had just whispered something back to her. Her mother's love was still working, still healing others, even now. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker. The letter, her mother's final words, was on the table beside her. She opened it again, though she had read it 100 times. "You'll always be my little girl." She smiled through tears. "Always." She whispered back, and then something happened. A small sound from outside. Laughter. Children playing. One of them shouted, "Mom, look!" Emily leaned closer to the glass. A little girl was standing in the street below, holding pink tulips. Her mother bent down, helping her fix the ribbon around the flowers. For a moment, Emily couldn't breathe. It was such a small, ordinary scene, but it felt like a message. A reminder. Life goes on. Love never leaves. She watched them until they disappeared around the corner. Then she whispered, "I get it now, Mom." The next morning, she went back to the hospital early. She brought a fresh bouquet of pink tulips and placed them under her mother's nameplate on the wall. One of the nurses noticed, "Those are beautiful. Special occasion?" Emily smiled, "Just remembering someone who taught me what love really means." The nurse nodded, smiling back. "You know," she said, "I think your mom would be proud of you." Emily looked at the flowers, glowing softly in the sunlight, and whispered, "I hope so." As she turned to leave, something in her chest felt lighter. The guilt that once consumed her was gone, replaced by peace. Outside, the morning air was fresh, the sky bright, the world alive again. She walked down the familiar street, past the cafe, past the park, past the echoes of who she used to be. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't look back. She didn't need to, because she finally understood. Karma was never her enemy. It wasn't about punishment. It was about balance, about growth, about love finding its way home. Emily stopped at the corner, closed her eyes, and smiled toward the sky. "Thank you." And in that quiet moment, as the breeze brushed her cheek, she could almost feel it, a gentle, familiar warmth, like her mother's arms around her one last time. Full circle.